Today we have a new light in house. It's this guy right down here, and it is the successor to this one, the 600C Pro, which is a super popular, super versatile light. I want to give you guys a rundown on kind of the differences between these and if it's worth the upgrade or if it's worth adding to your kit. All right, before we jump into it, I just want to say, if you guys enjoy our content, if you've been watching it for a while, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate the support. And frankly, if you don't, you may never see our videos again. Now, moving on. There is a lot of similarities between the 600C and the Mark II here. And before we jump into those, I want to talk a little bit about the 600 series in general and why I think it's such an amazing light, why I think it's essential in today's filmmaking world to have as a part of your kit. So if I were to sum it up in one word, what this light fixture here is, what it does, it is versatile. It is a super versatile light in terms of its capabilities. It is a point source light, obviously, which means you can do hard light with it, you can make it soft, you can use things like Fresnel's, spotlight mounts, you can diffuse it as much as you want, and that is just kind of the nature of point source lights, but this one really takes it one step further with the color aspect. Now, obviously, playing with colors is super fun, it's really great, and it's really fun when you're doing really unique effects. But the real thing that makes this powerful is having the different color temperature range that you can do, which is very big. But the color aspect adds the green and magenta tinting, which if you've ever shot on location and you're working with lights that are already on a site or in a location, having that functionality built into a light is super helpful. I think Aputure, when they came out with the Mark II here, they kept that in mind, they kept that versatility in mind and looked at how they could make this even more versatile. And I think that they did it. So let's jump right into it and talk about some of the visible differences with these lights. Right away, the first thing you'll notice with these cases is there's a size difference. So the Mark I here, the case is actually smaller. The Mark II is slightly larger. It's about the same height here when you have it sitting on the ground, but it is wider and it is longer here. If you're familiar with Aputure cases, then it's exactly like all the Aputure cases. Here you can kind of see that height difference. The other difference with it in terms of its case is right here. It is the carry handle. It is kind of the same design. There's really nothing hugely different other than this one has a 2-column piece here, and this one is just a single column. I think this is great. It's a small detail, but hopefully it should be less prone to having things go wrong with it. We have had issues with the Aputure cases in the past with zippers and stuff. While I like the cases, the issues that we've had have been a little annoying with zippers kind of breaking at certain points. We have not had that with the 600C Mark I here. We have not had any major issues with it, although this piece did pop out the other day. I don't really know why. It does pop back in. It hasn't been a huge issue, but it's just a small little detail there. So that is the only real differences with the cases, the carry handle and the overall size. I'm actually gonna grab the 1200D case here so that you guys can kind of see the size comparison. This is kind of how the 1200D case stacks up with this new 600C Pro. From the camera, it might look pretty similar. It is very, very close in terms of width. I think it's actually exactly the same in terms of length this way. The 600C Mark II is, I think, a little bit longer. And then the overall height, slightly taller on the 1200D compared to this guy. It's pretty nice to see though that they're a pretty similar footprint just for when you're loading it on carts and stuff, and for the people who are actually keeping them in the cases that they shipped. So we've talked about all the differences with the case, which are pretty minor, but let's talk about what's inside the case now. So when you open it up, you'll see something that looks very familiar. There's a lot of things in here that are the same. So first of all, the ballast itself looks identical. I'll pull that out here. Kind of have the same design. There are some things worth noting on this that I will get to in just a bit. The next thing is the header cables. This is a really nice thing that I'm super glad to see they did. They have not changed the header cables and they have not changed the power cables. They're obviously using Nutric power connectors for a lot of their stuff. I'm really happy to see though that this is the same header cable and it's compatible with the Mark I. It just keeps things clean and simple, which I really like. Now, moving on to the light, I will pull that out here. When you keep this on, visually, it is identical with the exception of that little marking right there, the Mark II. Let me mount that here on the stand. Again, this light really is overall the same design, but there are some differences when it comes to the cob and the heatsink, which I will get to in a second. But first, I want to talk about this right here. This is the new hyper reflector that they have. First things you'll notice with this is it's a longer hyper reflector. Now, a lot of times you'll think and your mind will immediately go to, well, it's a tighter beam angle. It is actually the same beam angle, it is not tighter. The reason that they had to do that is related to the cob design here. So same beam angle, and it actually gives you a lot more output, which is really great. So this is the Mark II. Let me switch them around here. This is the Mark I, this is the Mark II with the longer design. And that might be possibly why they had to make the case here just a little bit bigger, because you got a little bigger dish. The nice thing too with the bigger case is it makes getting the cables and stuff in a little bit easier. You just got a little bit more room, which is nice. Moving on to the light itself, let's talk about the cob design here. There's been some big changes here. This right here is the Mark II. This is the Mark I. So as you can tell right away, the big noticeable difference is it looks a little bit smaller. From my understanding, the reason behind this is they are able to kind of cluster up those LED chips tighter. And with that, it helps with the design or something on this chip to be able to output a little bit more light. On top of that, there is improved cooling with these chips because obviously 600 watts on something this size is going to produce a lot of heat. So a more efficient cooling system is just going to help overall to be able to push these chips a little bit more. The other noticeable difference is this kind of has a smooth texture to it, where this has a, I don't know if I should be doing this, but it's kind of like a Fresnel pattern to it. And the other thing I noticed too is it's a lot easier to see the diodes on this than it is this, for whatever reason. Part of it is you can see it a lot easier because you can dim it so much more, which we'll get to a little bit later. So one other thing, kind of getting into some differences, is while it looks the same, this one, the Mark II, technically has an IP54 weather rating. Now, the Mark I was listed as weather resistant. Obviously, I can assume it can take a little bit of weather, a little bit of wetness, but this one is technically IP54, which is great. You do kind of have that peace of mind, and they did talk a little bit about it being better weather sealed. So that's one thing worth noting. Like I said, from a surface level, it looks exactly the same. Now let's talk a little bit more about what makes the Mark II a little bit more versatile. So it all kind of revolves around this new cob here, this new chip on board that they have, the new design with it. So the first and most obvious one is it has more output. Both these lights have a maximum power draw of 720 watts. So technically it's not pulling more power, at least according to the spec sheet, but it is getting more output. Now, this is two parts to it. The first part with the output is related to the dish design. So with this new hyper reflector, they're claiming 82% more output, which is pretty massive, especially when you consider the fact that they're pulling the same amount of power. That's with the dish. When you take those away and you're left with just this, just bare as they are, you're still getting a 35%, I believe, increase, a 35% output increase on this light over this one. So that's a really great thing to have. Like I said, just seeing those incremental improvements is fantastic. The other thing is, I think what they call hypersync, and it is related to the dimming and kind of the smoothness, but more importantly, the minimum brightness that you can do on this light. While that seems small, I have had so many situations where we are on set on a location and we need it to go even more dim than what it currently is with this guy or even any of our other lights. And so knowing that this thing can get super, super dim is actually a really, really nice feature and a welcome improvement to see. That is really the majority of those items. Like I said, they're small incremental improvements on this light, but I think the great thing to see is that this light is coming in at the same price that this one was originally, which is $2,500 when this was launched. This was coming in at $2,500 as well. And again, they're just small improvements. And the really awesome part is, as someone who has Mark Is and Mark IIs, I see us using both of these lights still well into the future. By no means does this light make this one outdated. And in a lot of ways, I think they're gonna work well together. So I think it's a lot of great improvements to see. I love seeing them refine these products and just continue to make small improvements across the board. Because what they have here is already an amazing light, so it's kind of hard to improve on that sometimes, but I think they've knocked it out of the park with this. I think it's a great list of improvements that just overall, like I said, make this a super versatile light, which is, I think, what this light series is all about. All right, with that, I won't go on any longer. If you enjoyed this video, like I said, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give us a like, we'd really appreciate it. And if you have any questions in regards to the Mark II, the Mark I, maybe something I missed, let us know in the comments below. Again, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next video.
Cool. I'm gonna subscribe, see if I can meet him again.